stopping by our booth at the State Fair. Shop our KFAN Pro Shop now to stock up on your favorite new designs. Get them soon before they're gone. That's KFAN.com, keyword store to shop today.
Kevin O'Connell, coach of the Minnesota Vikings, is on the 9 to noon show 1 hour from now. That's a weekly occurrence here from Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center. And if you would like to join.
Yeah, absolutely. Every week since we're here at TCO chatting with KO, we want to get a question for the coach. So, and that's up to you. So with the free iHeartRadio app, you hit that microphone and utilize the talkback function. Give us up to your best 30 seconds. A question for the coach, the 3-0 Minnesota Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell. And one of you during that interview in the 11 o'clock hour will play that for Kevin. So please do. Free iHeartRadio app, hit the talkback.
Here's the scribe, Ben Goessling, also a weekly guest, 9 to noon, each and every Tuesday from TCOPC, courtesy of Standard Heating and Air. Learn more at standardheating.com, standardheating.com. And to follow him as 9 to noon does via the X machine, via Twitter at Ben Goessling. What's in the newsletter this week, Friday?
I've been looking a little bit, was just doing some research on Vikings Packers. I'm kind of working on this theory that this rivalry is about to kind of get reinfused with a little bit of juice. I mean, it's always got some of that, but it feels like it's been a little bit down lately. This is only the third time since 1996 that both of the games between these teams are scheduled to happen at noon. Now, things probably have gotten flexed over that time, but it's not common that national TV doesn't pick up one of these two. And this is slated to be the first of the two noon starts, which kind of tells you about where the buzz was about these two teams, probably more so the Vikings, I guess, before the season. But with the Packers doing what they've been able to do without Jordan Love, and of course the Vikings kind of becoming the talk of the league through a 3-0 start, looking a little bit at that, looking at the Aaron Jones move over here and what goes into that. But it should be a fun one at Lambeau. It's got a little more intrigue than I maybe expected at the beginning of the year.
The Green Bay Packers absolutely are the number one rival of the Minnesota Vikings, right?
Yep.
I've always found it interesting. You know, I don't know what my one of us status is now, having lived here since 98.
Well, you weren't born here.
Well, okay, so I'm not one of us. Okay, but
okay.
An ancillary piece in the state caring about the teams and 18, having lived here for nearly half my life. It's always been interesting to note and or notice when the Green Bay Packers are either middling or they're not that good.
Yeah.
The exchange between Vikings and Packers fans, it takes the turn of Packers fans saying, well, the Bears are our number one rival. They always have been. Well, yeah, for your great-great-great-grandfather. I mean, maybe it still is. Maybe it forever will be, hearkening to Lombardi and George Halas and Brian Piccolo and Paul Hornung and days like that. But you only hear that when the Packers are middling or bad and the Vikings are above average and or good. Well, this doesn't matter. The Bears are our chief rival anyway.
Well, yeah, and I wonder how much of that is geographic. I mean, in the Milwaukee area, you're so much closer to Chicago than you are. I mean, so much of it here is you get the crossover from people coming over for college or coming over for jobs or whatever.
Looking for Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there are times in Wisconsin driving through there, at least with the cell signal, it's like, man, oh man. But that Milwaukee thing being so close to Chicago, there's probably a little more of that in that part of the state. But yeah, I think it's hard at this point when that rivalry, the Packers and Bears, has been so one-sided for so long.
Right.
It's hard to get the same kind of steam for it as it had in the probably the 1960s and even before that at times. And this one, it's so much different. It's been, obviously the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, even into the 2020s is much more competitive. It's really been these two teams in this division more so than the Bears and the Lions over the history of at least the NFC North and probably back in the 90s as well. So I think this one has certainly burned hotter, and all of the crossover with players going from one side to the other, a lot of them, ex-Packers coming here, Brett Favre, and you go on down the list. But I think this one always has a little more spice just because it has been these two teams a lot. And it's teams playing a lot of big games.
Now, when you go there to cover the game, you stay in Green Bay, correct?
The last few years, we've actually done the Wausau thing. We basically go over halfway and then drive the rest of it Sunday morning.
Yeah, because we
get hotels.
Yeah, we stay in Appleton.
Good Pizza Hut in Wausau.
Pizza.
Is there?
Wow.
I have to check that out. There's a decent.
There's an oxymoron line there that I'm going to hold off on for fear that I cost somebody some advertising dollars. But anyway.
Yeah.
But so staying in Green Bay, like you've stayed in Green Bay many times, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think we've stayed in Green Bay one time.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do in Green Bay? Like what do you actually do? You know, you go to Kroll's West, maybe.
Yeah. I think I've only been there a couple times.
You're not a big Oneida casino guy.
No.
You probably stay away from that.
Yeah.
What do you do in Green Bay? Especially when it's a Sunday or Monday night game.
Yeah.
And you have all day.
Yeah.
Go to Shopko.
Well, I think, there's usually... there's decent running trails along the Fox River, so and that's usually what I'm in the market for is trying to find a decent place to run.
The only thing Nordo and I do is run from our past, so that's super special. What else do you do?
There's a couple decent restaurants. I mean, like Titletown
just
Brewery
normal
next
road
to
trip.
Yeah, I mean it's
kind of like walking around Chicago and
yeah, very similar to that. Very
Michigan Avenue.
Yeah, very similar.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool.
Oneida Street, Michigan Avenue. Practically indistinguishable from one another.
The At Access Vikings podcast, which you can get via either At Access Vikings or 3-2. The Access Vikings podcast, which is accessible at Access Vikings or via Ben's Twitter feed at Ben Goessling with Andrew Kramer. There are some interesting things there when I listen to it. I'd like to begin with this. Revised predictions. For those who
we had to walk those back.
Right, but that's okay. We don't, we'll make predictions occasionally.
Yeah.
This year we didn't really hone in on a win total for the Minnesota Vikings. We were just basically, I was at least like, well, I mean, I think I know what a playoff team looks like.
Yeah.
And if they stay healthy with the right players, this is a playoff team. I just feel it's a playoff team. I ain't going to put, a 10, 11, 12 or whatever on it, but I felt it was a playoff team without, taking the leap of a wins prediction. With revised predictions from Access Vikings, what's that all about?
Well, I think because a lot of us at the beginning of the season, we had, 7 wins, 8 wins, 9 wins. I think Andrew was maybe positive Peter there and put them at 9. I think that was the most anybody had. Royce might have actually been the Mr. Sunshine, as he is wont to do. But yeah, a lot of us were kind of in that 7, 8, 9 win range.
Yep.
And you sit here already and say, this was supposed to be the tough part of the schedule. This was the stretch, especially those 2 home games.
You revised to a 15-2. Just get to the point.
I got to probably 12.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Because here's the thing. At this point, even if they were to go 7-7, and you don't know where things are going to go with health and all of this kind of stuff over the course of the next 14 games, but even if they played 500, they're 10-7, and they're probably in the playoffs. So. And you look at the middle of the schedule, it looks inviting. The Jaguars, the Titans, the Bears not being very good probably changes things there a little bit. So, yeah, I think 11, 12 wins is more in the range.
All right. Now, Sam Darnold, crowd favorite.
Yeah.
Also part of this podcast at Access Vikings via Twitter if you want to learn more about it. Again, for those who missed it or didn't listen, Sam Darnold, crowd favorite.
Yeah.
What's that?
Well, it was interesting to see the reaction on Sunday when he gets hurt, because there's kind of the air goes out of the building. I'm sure you felt it. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, what now? And just 3 weeks into a season saying this kind of a reaction to Sam Darnold is probably not a storyline I would have expected quite to that degree this early. Even to the point where there was I think maybe in like the north or the southwest corner of the stadium, there was like a brief chant when he came back. Yes,
I heard it too.
Yeah, it was wild. We're getting that 3 weeks in.
It was a murmur.
Yeah, it was a murmur, but that will get louder if he continues to play like this over the course of the next few seasons. Yes, they did.
Who was beloved.
Yes, and
did I see it via
Darnold after the game?
Did I see it via your tweet? I think it was that he talked to Brian O'Neill, like right in that moment or something.
Yes.
Yeah. What'd he say?
He basically said felt like he got blocked into him, and he said I didn't mean to do it. And a lot of those guys were like, I was I think O'Neal said it stung to hear him get booed because he's not a dirty player. I think that was actually like the first personal foul of his career, which now is 8 or 9 seasons.
I saw that stat, the first roughing the passer penalty maybe in his career.
Yes.
And that's crazy for a guy who's made his money attacking the QB.
Right, yeah, and it gets so much harder to not get those penalties as the strike zone gets smaller. So, yeah, to play as long as he has and be as successful as he has without those, I think that probably speaks to the fact that he's not a player that is typically looking for cheap shots, looking to injure anybody. So yeah, it was an odd turn to see him get booed there, but obviously it's people not necessarily knowing all of that or having all of that context, and they see what they see, and it's that reaction is probably kind of quick twitch, but it happens. I think in part because people just react to what they're seeing and the importance that Sam Darnold has taken on here pretty quickly.
Star Tribune and StarTribune.com fan line continues with a finale here. Jim Souhan, super talented columnist, Sue Dog, as they call him in the business, wonders if the Minnesota Vikings right now are the best team in the National Football League.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we're getting stories like it's awesome. I think, okay, we're not going to, we're not going to put you in a, all right, 3-2. It's a lot of joy and a lot of glee and a lot of gaze casting and comps with other teams around the NFL. But Jim, he wrote a column wondering if the Vikings are the best team in the NFL right now, and it's a fair question, right?
Yeah, I mean,
at this moment.
Yes, because I mean, you start to see. I mean, they're 3-0 for the first time I think since 2016. What stat did I see yesterday? They're the first team since the 96 Packers, I think, to be undefeated, and then like something about the defense playing the way it has. So, I mean, like
first team since 2001 to have at least 5 sacks a game in the first 3 games.
I mean, when you start to talk about those types of things, they get in that conversation because teams don't do this. I mean, if you're in the same sentence as teams that won Super Bowls or teams that went deep in the playoffs, because you have done something to put yourself there statistically, it completely changes the conversation. I didn't think this was a conversation we'd be having 3 weeks in. I thought, top level, maybe there's a playoff path there, but I had questions about Darnold. I had questions about would the defense hold up? I mean, probably underestimated at least through 3 weeks, and in 17 games will tell this story better, but the degree to which Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores have gotten the best out of what they have on both sides of the ball has been impressive, and that's a lot of the reason why they are where they are.
With the defense and the way it's orchestrated by Brian Flores and the coaches, and these coaches are operating at an extremely high level right now. Like yesterday, part of the narrative or common thread 9 to noon was a sideline to sideline thing. It's like what's happening with the guys and with the headsets and the microphones on one sideline compared to the other sideline. And these are super well respected staffs and everything, and they're just getting obliterated in the most key times of games. But with that said, for the Vikings defense, there's somebody new who's stealing the show every week. Your guy Van Ginkel, he gets the pick 6 at MetLife. Then it's Cashman with 13 tackles, 3 passes defensed, and a sack. That's immortality type stuff right there, because of the passes defensed meshed with. So to defend passes, you have to be away from the quarterback, and to get tackles, you have to be close to players and or the quarterback. He had a sack too, so that so it was Cashman. Even though Patrick Jones has 4 sacks through all of this, but it was Cashman being most identifiable that game. And then it was Jonathan Grenard the last game. So it's like there's almost a bit here for the newsletter or for 9 to noon or something, like who next? Like B-Flows, whatever. Which rabbit is he going to pull out of the hat this week? Like I wonder which defensive player will jump up and steal the show this week. And why do you think it's somebody different weekly?
Well, the other thing to point out, too, is they didn't have Ivan Pace. They didn't have Dallas Turner in that game, and they still are able to do what they did. I think a lot of it is there's so much adaptability in this defense where they can make switches at the last second, check to different things, that I think blocking schemes get so confused and so thrown off that you get guys just about every week that get free runs at the quarterback, which either means sacks or it means a quarterback is rushed and throws balls into traffic, or things get intercepted. I mean, Josh Metellus has a pick. Harrison Phillips tipped one last week. that almost got picked off by Harrison Smith at the goal line. It has put a lot of players in positions to make plays because you have quarterbacks, I think, playing late. And playing late typically is a great way to get yourself in trouble as a quarterback in this league. And I think a lot of that stuff just creates confusion. It creates hesitation in a way that allows a lot of different people to get the job done and have opportunities to make big plays.
Doesn't it take, it feels like it might take a bit of humility on the part of the players in this defense, sure, because this is a stats-driven league, big stats, big paydays, all of that. And when you're asking your first-round rookie like Dallas Turner a week ago in the Niners game to drop into coverage, or you're asking certain guys to play in some of these new spots, it's the combination of fly by the seat of your pants. You're learning so much. So there's a lot, versus Daniil. Okay, you're going to put your hand in the dirt in a 4-3 defense, and you're going to go after and eat quarterbacks for a living and make a fair dollar doing it. There's got to be an element of humility where it's like this week, this thing that we figured out in LaFleur's operation with Love, you're not going to be hand in the dirt. You're going to be up. There's this play. We're going to put you in a weird spot, but if you show up in that spot, I guarantee you're going to make a play. There's humility there. It's trusting in Flores' scheme, following the keys of speak. It's a very interesting, I guess, the entirety of the operation to watch.
Yeah, I mean, they've moved towards this idea of positionless football, and there's only so much you can get there. I mean, you're not obviously going to have Harrison Phillips singled up on Christian Watson on Sunday or something like that. But the idea that you can move Van Ginkel around, you can move Dallas Turner around, you can move Grenard, you can move Metellus, you can move Pace, Cashman, all of these guys that can play different spots, I think, has made them more flexible. I think it has made it so that they're able to stay ahead of defenses a little bit more. I mean, I heard Stephon Gilmore and Andrew Van Ginkel talk about this in the locker room yesterday, that eventually when coordinators are calling things the same way, and this is our coverage, we're going to do what we do and we're going to stick with it, people figure it out. But they have so many ways to move players around and change to different things on the fly that it makes it more difficult to get a beat on trends and tendencies and all of those kinds of things. So that may mean that it looks different for a certain week, and that may mean that somebody is in position to rack up stats a little more often than it happens another week. But I think, they've given out 30 points through 3 weeks. It's just like, that's not stuff we see very often. And I think if you play at that level for the course of a season, everybody's probably the rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing. Everybody's going to come out looking pretty good statistically.
Is there an element of this defense? Part of this is game flow too.
Yeah.
That this team had a goal that we're going to score early, we're going to start fast, like the team did in 2022. They're doing that again.
Right.
And that helps tell the story of how these games end up in the first place. But is there potentially any weakness that you still see with this defense? I mean, it's a top 3 scoring defense. We love that part of it.
Yeah.
The Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs eventually are going to get theirs, right? They're chasing a scoreboard. They're chasing a big deficit in these cases. But is there anything you've seen where it's like, okay, well, this is working so well that it's kind of masked that? Could it be pass defense in general, like the Gilmores, et cetera, who's been a popular or consistent topic of conversation, just seeing how the veteran's making his way. But anything pique your interest there?
Well, I think the question I have will be if somebody at some point gets a bead on what they're doing, and a lot of the talk, I think a lot of the study the Vikings did was saying, how did the division opponents attack us the second time we played them? Because they lost all of those games the second time. Nice. It was kind of this thing of, okay, how did we get exposed, or how did we get figured out? How did we get studied? And I do wonder, and I think a lot of what they built into the defense was to counteract that. But will somebody get a little better handle of, okay, this is when they check to this is what this means, and because the whole thing with the way Kevin O'Connell calls plays, the way you hear Sean McVay do this, Kyle Shanahan, is we figure out your rules, we figure out your tendencies, and we program things in where you are basically putting yourself in a bind. It's almost guerrilla warfare. We figure out what you're going to do in a certain situation or certain formation, certain motion, and we know it's going to give us this matchup. So if somebody gets to that point, I don't know if that'll happen, but I think over the course of a 17-game season, I think Bursich tweeted about this yesterday, that these coordinators are good. They're going to figure some things out. But if that happens, do these corners get tested in a way that you see a little bit of what happened at the end of last season, where people say we can take them deep and try to throw downfield. We saw and
that was the key
Collins
there.
play last
Nobody's
week.
getting over the top of them right now,
and that was the beginning of last year too. But that eventually people did. So does any of that happen? I think the change here though is that they're blitzing so much less. They're playing so much more two safeties over the top, playing a lot of quarters where you're not probably exposed in the way that you could be if you were playing. I mean, they talked about more man coverage. We have not seen that yet, and they may get to some of those things, but they are also just blitzing less. I think there are more guys in coverage that may help over the course of time. But yeah, as teams get more tape, teams get more ability to study tendencies. That would be the question I have. But so far, they are so far ahead of offenses that it seems like it's going to be a while yet before anybody catches up.
If Jordan Love is not the proverbial 100%, does it behoove them to bring him back this game or wait to go to play the Rams?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you're 2-0 with Willis. Love's better than Willis.
Sure.
But you're also facing a team that's unbelievably unpredictable right now, with 16 sacks and 1 million quarterback hits. You know, and this is the future of your franchise right here in Jordan Love. What do you think?
It's an interesting question because I could also see them looking at this and saying, hey, it's a division game. This is a team that we don't want to get 2 games behind in the division right away and then have to go beat them at their place to win a tiebreaker in December. So the fact that he practiced as much as he did last week, if I'm going to the sports book in whatever state it's legal to place a bet on this, I would bet he plays. But it is an interesting question because nobody has had a good game. Nobody's looked good. Nobody has avoided playing this defense without getting hit. Right. And the Packers have a good offensive line, but and everybody, whether their offensive line is good, I mean, we saw Trent Williams struggle against this. So if you get free runs, it doesn't really matter how good your offensive line is if there's nobody there to block you. So
Laramie Tunsil had a compensated anxiety attack.
Yeah. I mean, that was, oh my gosh. Yeah, that was almost
unprecedented.
It's one of those things where you're like, I mean, you almost feel bad for the guy because it's going so badly for him. But when you have that kind of a situation, you have a quarterback coming off of a knee injury, it is an interesting question because they are probably going to put him in some spots where he's going to get hit. And I think he plays. I think the magnitude of the game probably makes that happen. But there is that question there too.
I hope he does. That's Ben Goessling. He covers the Vikings for the Star Tribune, courtesy of Standard Heating and Air. He joins 9 to noon, standardheating.com. And around the corner, let's discuss Jordan Addison, Jalen Naylor, and much more. It's 9 to noon from the Minnesota Vikings facility, Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center. It's a TCO Tuesday, where Kevin O'Connell, coach of the Vikings, joins us from this studio 30 minutes from now.
Attention comedy fans, the one and the only Sebastian Maniscalco is coming to XL Energy Center. Get ready for an unforgettable night of laughter and fun when he takes the stage on Friday, February 14th. Tickets are on sale now. Get the full details at KFAN.com. Keyword calendar.
So just for those who may have missed the news yesterday, Nordo hit on it an hour and change ago also with Vikes Bites, but Sam Darnold's okay into this Green Bay game. I mean, it's a bruise. O'Connell wasn't coy, but I thought he said it fairly, like, we hope he can do everything that's required up to this game, but Darnold's fine, right?
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, I don't think there's any question about whether he's going to play. I would expect he's probably full or mostly full in practice this week. Right. So, it seems as good a news as they could have expected, given how that looked, at least initially on Sunday.
Jalen Naylor's maturation and progress. Because he wouldn't get this many snaps if Addison were not playing after a preseason where O'Connell featured him in at least 2 of the games and his plays were different than they were in his first two preseasons. They had a little more explosivity and intermediate type stuff to them to put Naylor in a position to come through, and he mostly came through. So it's with Jalen Naylor's maturation and progress, just like, what do you think they're on to with Naylor in his third year?
Well, the question with him was always health, and he's been healthier, at least been able to come back from some things more quickly than he's been able to do in the past. I think he has shown, we always knew about the vertical speed, but I think he's shown a lot of ability to uncover and find space in the middle of zones. I think a lot of the concepts they've had for him have worked well in that regard. It's interesting to me how this goes when Addison does get back, because this wide receiver 3 question was a big one before the season, is how are they going to set up beyond Justin Jefferson, beyond Jordan Addison, especially as they wait for Hockenson to come back. But it's like, if you have Naylor as wide receiver 3 when Addison's healthy, you have Jefferson, Hockenson comes back at some point, and you have Aaron Jones, like, that's a lot of weapons. I think Naylor's emergence makes a big difference, because that he basically becomes KJ Osborne in a lot of ways, and probably different in certain ways, probably a little more dynamic in some ways than Osborne was. But having that level of depth, especially when they get Hockenson, makes it even that more of a potent offense.
Well, the benefit of it, too, is the idea that Hockenson would just come back and suddenly it's 12 targets, 11 catches, and he's the red zone threat.
Right.
I think that would be a little lofty.
Probably.
I think if he comes back for the London game, or even after the bye, you come right back and he'd be a focal point probably at U.S. Bank against the Kitties week 7.
Yep.
But in the same vein, the too-much weapons part of it, talk about, filling that gap in the absence of Addison. I don't really know when he's coming back. Like Naylor, I don't want to say like he's MVP of the offense, but from a found money perspective and from his amount of time that we put into that third receiver spot, he's been so damn good.
Yeah. It's one of those things where you look at it, and we talked about it on defense, missing Turner and Pace. When they're missing Addison, Hockenson, and then Naylor comes in and has played the role that he's played, and really has been. They haven't just been like, okay, let's throw it to Justin every play, and then he gets one every once in a while. He's been a fairly significant target where they're dialing up a lot of things that he's the first or second read, and he's made a lot of big plays. Third downs, red zone. He's been obviously able to be a big factor in the red zone here. So, yeah, I think a lot of that stuff. You talk about found money. I think it's exactly right, because they did need something there, and I don't know that they would have expected it to be to this degree. They've been high on him for a long time, but it's hard to assume that anybody's going to come in and have an impact right away, especially with as little as he'd actually played before this year. But yeah, he's been a big impact. I think the degree to which they've been able to do what they wanted to do has a lot to do with him.
From 2022 to now, the work Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and his staff have done shaping what is this 3-0 right now. And I started 2022, not simply because that was his first year, but that draft, with all due respect, was a disaster.
Yeah.
And clearly he and others around him have had a level of self-awareness to change some things without talking about it.
Yeah.
And some form of the approach. And, when O'Connell's in here in a half hour, one of the questions I have down is like, I can't remember how I phrased it. Is it a prerequisite that you when you draft or sign people, they're scholars of the game and they can handle change, and they can adapt quickly to change, and they don't complain about it, because it's just with Cashman, Van Ginkel, maybe Grenard, Shaq Griffin, and some Gilmore, some others. They have found football brainiacs.
Yeah.
These guys are scholars of the game who, like, I'll never forget something old Bears linebacker Hunter Hillenmeyer told me years ago. It's pregame. I'm out on the field, maybe talking to Lieber or something. And he's talking to Hunter Hillenmeyer. And Hillenmeyer, it was a bad Bears season. And then he was like, I don't know if he pointed to people, but he's like, there are X amount of people who always are going to run faster than me, hit harder than me, and jump higher than me.
Yeah.
But I'm going to get X amount of years out of it because I follow the plan and I do my job. Well, that's clear to me, at least through 3. They've brought in guys who are on the younger side, so they still have pop, but they're scholars of the game, and that's super important.
Yeah, and especially if you're going to play defense this way, because so much of it is seeing how offenses adjust. And when the signals go across, and you see it on Sundays where the hand signals are going across the defense, it requires everybody to be on the same page and to see things a certain way. That doesn't work if you don't have somebody that can perceive what's happening, that can react to it quickly, and say, this is the response that we have built in. I don't think you could play defense that way with players who aren't sharp and well-studied and nuanced. I think that is a really important part of the way they're playing, and it does make up for a lot. You don't have to just... athleticism and speed and physicality are always going to be things that you can't teach or coach, and that's important to have. But I think the way they've been able to do it, it does allow a little bit of a workaround in the sense that if you're in the right spot or you have a free run, you don't have to have... if you have a free run at a quarterback, you don't need the deepest set of pass rushing moves and counter moves to beat a tackle. You just have to rush the right lane and get the quarterback to the ground. It does make things easier when you have that ability to put offenses on their heels, which they've done a lot. And I think that component of it, the intellect that they have on defense, is a big part of the reason why.
Well, and the intellect, and I think, for Kwesi, knowing that, he knows how the 2022 draft went, right? Like, he has to be self-aware in terms of the good times, bad times in his job.
He owned
and all
it,
of that.
I think, in that press conference a couple weeks ago.
But going and adding on to that, then kind of talking about, like, the humility of some of these guys playing in different spots and sacrificing statistics maybe in some respects to make the whole thing work. For him, and I'm as an outsider, it's not like I know specifically how this process works, but the ability of a GM to sit down and allow a guy like Flores, in some ways, like, all right, I got my credit card here, Brian, and I need to know what's going to make this thing work, and allowing Brian and the defensive staff to be so, Durante Jones, right, and some of the offseason identification, not only of talent, but specifically, the type of player that will work for this defense.
Yes.
I think that takes a lot of pride out of the conversation, and I think that's a strong move by Kwesi to truly, come through on that cascading of information and the collaboration aspect to allow these guys to pick some of those pieces, and they're all working out.
Yeah, and you hear Flores say it, and I think Kwesi is kind of taking this approach as well of, like, Flores will say this: I don't care where a good idea comes from. If it's a good idea, if it's from Kevin O'Connell on a blitz, let's use it. There's not this, it has to be my thing or my idea. And, it's good to have a clear line of who's responsible for things, where the buck stops. But I think if that becomes something where nobody feels like they can bring a good idea to the table because they're going to get shouted down, or, hey, I'm at the top of this pecking order, this is not your place, just go do your job and shut up. It can be prohibitive. Yeah, it can be prohibitive. And I think they have shown in a lot of ways that we can get to a better level as a whole if good ideas come from a lot of places, because, people that are around this place as much as they are, or as invested as they are in this, probably have something to bring to the table. And if they don't, that's a different problem. But I think they have created a place where people can come in and say, no, I think this is actually the thing that we need, and they know that they can be heard.
Elite. Thank you, my brother. And we will look for the newsletter on Friday, and you can learn more about that newsletter by going to @Ben Goessling via Twitter. That's where you also can access Vikings, a podcast he and Andrew Kramer did a couple of days ago. And this is all courtesy of Standard Heating and Air and standardheating.com. News du Nord around the corner, followed by Kevin O'Connell joining us from the TCO radio studios at Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center on KFAN.
Join KFAN and Justin Guard for an epic Purple Watch party at Forgotten Star Brewing Co. on October 6th. Come and enjoy great brews and quarterly prizes, all while watching the Purple as they battle it out against New York across the pond in a London town. Doors open at 7 a.m. For full details, head over to KFAN.com. You already know the keyword is calendar.
10:48. Minnesota Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell, about 10, 15 minutes from now. Nordo right now with News du Nord, courtesy of Canterbury Park and CanterburyPark.com. We have 3 days remaining of live racing right out there at the park. We race tomorrow, Wednesday. Yes, Wednesday racing, 5 o'clock. Thursday, 4 o'clock. Saturday closing day, 4 o'clock. CanterburyPark.com for information on that and the Pro Football Pick'em, which is free to enter. What's up, Norge?
Yes, good morning. News du Nord. We'll start with baseball before we transition to a couple of NFL bits. Twins final week, PA. They're hosting the Marlins and the Orioles this week. It's Ober, then Woods, Richardson, and Festa on the mound against the Fish. Miami just wants the season to end, basically. But they're operating from a disadvantage, are the Twins. They're no longer in the wild card spot. The Royals and Tigers are both wild card teams and a game ahead of the Twins. The Royals are at the Natties and Braves this week. The Tigers, their schedule kind of looks good. They're hosting Tampa and the White Sox at home. Got to jump one of those teams. Difficult task ahead for Rocco's bunch as they enter the final week of the regular season.
Yeah, it's it seems to be difficult because of the inconsistent ways of the baseball team, specifically with the bats. And the fact that a majority, if not all, the right names are back. So it, with Correa and Buxton and Royce Lewis and stuff like that. So it's nut cutting time, as they say in the business. And the Orioles had been slow of late. I know they beat Detroit last Friday, but then Detroit may have meatloaf to Baltimore over the weekend. 2 out of 3 wasn't bad. So the Orioles, despite Santander and Gunnar Henderson and Rauchman and Cedric Mullins and some nice players they have, they ain't no bargain right now.
To the NFL, first in the division. I saw this yesterday. I sent you a tweet, a post that I saw on it. But Marcus Davenport is lost for the season with the Detroit Lions. He suffered a torn tricep muscle, and so he's officially done for 2024. Now we got to watch and Victoria/Chan go crazy for Frank Ragnow. He is a partially torn pec.
Jeez.
And is considered week to week. I don't know if ultimately he's going to try and play through it.
With a partially torn, all right, 3-2, with a partially torn pec. Seems like that A would be painful and B would be longer than a week-to-week deal.
Yeah, per NFL.com, he'll be week to week. It's not believed to be a season-ending injury. He had a sprained knee and sprained ankle last year in the postseason, played through it. I mean, Ragnow's as tough as it gets. So, but it's something to watch for our division rival. Monday Night Football, the doubleheader. I don't really like the doubleheader, to be honest, on Monday nights. I don't want to have to choose.
Right.
But in some ways, the Bills made it easy because the Bills put 30-something on the Jags in the first half, and we knew what that was going to look like the rest of the way. That's 47, just an absolutely shellacking the Bills put on the Jaguars. We talked about the Jags and Doug Peterson's team kind of limping their way to the finish line last year. I think they went 1-5 to finish.
Oh, that's right.
Trevor Lawrence has actually lost 8 consecutive starts now. So fat contract, and everybody's looking for the best in Trevor Lawrence. 8 consecutive starts. He missed week 17 last year. I think they beat the Carolina Panthers late last season. But he throws this hideous pick to DeMar Hamlin last night. Like, if I'm a Jaguars fan, this isn't necessarily forlorn fan base part 2, but the combination of being a Jaguars fan in the earlier game and then seeing Burrow as good as he was and this defense not being able to stop Jaden Daniels last night, a couple more forlorn fan bases in the mix. The 0-3 Jaguars absolutely reeling, and the Bengals, despite greatness from Burrow, they're 0-3 as well.
Wow. And to get to the playoffs, what is the bid? 8%? It's like a 5. Like, if you start 0-3, you have like a 5 or an 8% chance of making the postseason. That's tried and true. Also, that goes back to like 1980.
And they have the Ravens and Steelers. Ravens are gonna figure it out, right? They got their win over Zimmer's defense in Dallas, but the Steelers starting out 0-3. I mean, that's a really tough spot to climb. Stefanski's team has a right to have a say in this conversation too. So, man, it's tough times for the Bengals.
If we had done the 6-pack of picks yesterday, I would have gone 1-1, and I would have touted the Jacksonville Jaguars plus whatever amount of points they were getting. And here's why. Because it's more of an inside bit, and I can't exactly explain, why. But you get Buffalo at home. If you're going to beat Buffalo, and if you're going to, Buffalo likes to get in spine tinglers at home. And they win most of them, but like week number 1, they, I think it was Arizona. They went jacking around with Arizona a little bit, and the Cards are better, than they've been in the past. But then the next game they go on the road and they kill Miami. So then they come back home. Jacksonville's desperate to win that game or at least keep it close. And you can mess with Buffalo at home. That's for whatever weird reason. That's where you get them. And that wasn't the case. Probably after that first drive, Buffalo put where you got Dalvin's little brother, James Cook. Yeah, they can't find him all over the field, passing and running. It was destruction last night. I mean, that's the kind of loss where if that happens again, that's how coaches get fired, and things are just completely pear-shaped with Jacksonville. Conversely, I liked Washington last night.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, because I don't like what's happening with Cincinnati right now. I don't like things Jamar Chase is saying after losses, covert tweets, gestures, things like that. Burrow forever is shaking his hand like he's got some kind of a problem with a wrist or something like that. And Washington, despite kind of an ugly, inadequate, well, they won, so it's not inadequate. But the way they played the Giants, that wasn't great. But the quarterback came together a little bit. Week number 1, they got dusted by Tampa Bay at Tampa Bay, and then Tampa Bay, is out there losing to Denver at home. So the quirky nature of the league, it's quite unpredictable. But Cincinnati, with those running backs, no longer having Joe Mixon. T. Higgins got the franchise tag. He ain't happy about it.
No.
Tyler Boyd was key to what they do, and he left for more money. They're just down players that they either miss or they need in certain spots.
Similar to the Niners, maybe, where the off-season turmoil is leading to. I mean, we talked about the slow start in Bengals for the duration of Burrow's career, but this does feel different. I think.
Yeah. I mean, you could tell it last night by watching. They felt they had Washington anytime they wanted them. And the shiny toy couldn't figure out how to beat the scrappy team led by Dan Quinn. So speaking of San Francisco, as we close here, they've lost Javon Hargrave for the season. Okay, that is a major loss for them. And they're battling myriad injuries right now. So
Debo and Kittle on the bench.
Yep, but losing Hargrave for the season, and now Christian McCaffrey is heading to Germany to visit with a doctor in Munich because of this tendonitis with his Achilles. So they're 1-2, and they're generally the target at which to shoot in the NFC. But they have some bad things happening right now. This is 9 to noon. Kevin O'Connell, head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, joins us around the corner on KFAN.